Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Language Lounge. My name is Michelle Olah, and today I have my good friend Stephany Sipes here with me. Hi, Stephany.
Hi, Michelle.
Thanks for
having me.
I know this has been planned probably since when I first was going to start the podcast, and I sent kind of these emails out to some of the people that I really respect and would love to talk to. And that was like a year ago, and you agreed right away. And then I think life has just been like crazy for both of us, and it just never worked out. So thank you so much for taking the time today to talk with me. And so we talked about, when we were talking about what are we going to talk about? One of the things I think that struck me as we were kind of pre-planning was just your experience as a world language leader. And some of the experiences you've had both as a district leader, also on a national scale with LILL, the Leadership Initiative in Language Learning. And I know you and I were both very involved in that. So just kind of growing leadership and your experiences with leadership and leading teachers. And I know you found yourself this year in a different position, not the same job that you had before. And so that has kind of, I think, well, why don't you tell us a little bit? Why don't you tell us a little bit about how your experience has changed and how this new context is sort of bringing in some, different leadership questions and things that you've had than what you've had to deal with in the past. So give us a little background.
No, absolutely. So I will have to say I'm always a Spanish teacher at heart, no matter, what little office I have in central office trying to do that work. But I am really excited to be in a new district. This is my second year in a new district, and I loved my old district very, very much. But to you, what you were mentioning earlier about like the differences, it's been very re-energizing just to kind of take on some new leadership challenges. And I think the contrast, like we were talking about earlier, is my previous world language coordinator position. I was in a big district. Like at the time when I got started, I think we had over 60,000 students. So I think that's big. I know we have friends with like 250,000 students, but it was a big district. It had a very established world language department. I was actually, assuming that position from my mentor. So even I had like a rich context of the department. I was a teacher in the department. I was an assistant principal supporting the department. The core practices were in place. We had this, beautiful, thematically organized, proficiency-focused curriculum. And then I had a surprise COVID baby, which we love her. That was great. But I moved north.
Life change.
Life change. Surprise. And so, we moved pretty far north as our family grew, and it just kind of prompted me to, look for other opportunities. And now I find myself in what was a small district. We're now actually very rapidly growing. I think percentage-wise, we're the fastest growing district in our state.
Wow.
But I went from a district with nearly 130 teachers to now world language teachers to now about 30 world language teachers who had not had a dedicated world language curriculum coordinator before, but are awesome, like very highly committed, like ready to learn, ready to do all the things, as I think as a teacher or any educator, when like a position like that is created for you to support you, it just makes you feel so valued. Like that's been my experience in the past, when you're like, wow, like there's a position just here to like help me and help our students, which is really exciting. But it was just very different. So then, not a, established district-wide curriculum in place, that was proficiency focused, performance based, but just ready to do all the things. And because we are growing so quickly, we had one high school for all of our existence, and then had just opened up high school 2 a couple of years ago. And now we're growing so quickly, high school 3 is coming on board next year. So we're like,
That's
okay.
a lot. Fast, yeah.
So in my position, kind of doing like that needs assessment with this awesome group of world language teachers, it's kind of like, where do we start? right? And you know that when you have passionate educators that are like highly committed and ready to go, like they're ready to do all the things. And you know my personality, I as a human, I'm also ready to like do all the things, right? But
Yeah.
when you're supporting teachers that are in a district, we offered 5 languages. That means teachers have multiple preps. You've got
Mm-hmm.
teachers traveling between the 2 campuses, the first high school and now like the second high school, and that comes with its own challenges. So I didn't want to set some goals for us that were like so aggressive that it's like we're affective filter, we're in the red zone, like, and everybody's like saying pump the brakes. But then also knowing that we're growing, we do kind of have to like make some progress. And so it was like, do we start with pedagogy? Because we got folks ready to learn. They've got somebody now that's here
Yeah.
to bring, PD to their plate. Or do we start with curriculum?
Yeah.
And, we're both
Two
in
biggies.
two biggies, right? And,
Yeah.
we're both in NATSVille, and I love their, the framework, like the effective principles.
Mm-hmm.
And,
So explain what
is it
NATSFL
program
is for
design?
those listening.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes.
No, that's okay.
NATSVille is a
I always
national.
try give a speech. Yeah.
Yes, NATSVille. Please join if this suits you. NATSVille is the Association for Foreign Language, like district supervisors. So curriculum
Yeah.
coordinators. We do have some instructional coaches that are in those roles, directors,
Mm-hmm.
anybody that's providing that leadership to their world language teachers at the district level. It's also one of my favorite
Perfect.
organizations and is like a lifeline.
Yeah.
And so I love that they have their framework out there for effective world language programs. And I, as a baby coordinator in my last district, that's where I would go. Okay, how am I doing on program design? Are we doing what we need to
Mm-hmm.
do? Are we offering the right classes? Equity, all the things. How are we doing on teacher effectiveness? How's our assessment plan? How is our curriculum looking? And so when you know that you have to like juggle all 4 of those things, well, program design's in place. We have kids in
Mm-hmm.
classes here, so there's something going on. It really just led me to kind of pick between those 2.
Yeah. You know what I
And
think
that was
is
really hard.
what I really liked about what you just said is I think even if, we have listeners out there that are like, well, I'm not a district person. I don't make those choices, but we do, like, as teachers, as support people. I think this year more than ever, there is so much change, whether it's, the person next to you and where they come in. I'm thinking of a teacher leader that's sitting in a school and they, are grabbing those new people, they're bringing them in. And sometimes we look at all the stuff that they need to know, or even personally, I learned something new and I'm like, oh, look at all this stuff that I want to do. And I think we always are faced with the choice of where do we start and how do we get to our end goals in a way that doesn't break people and that we
No,
keep that
100%.
enthusiasm going, right? We keep that enthusiasm going, but we can't overwhelm ourselves, overwhelm our people next to you. So I think that's a really relevant question. Like, just where do I start and how do you start making some of these decisions, right? When there's so many things to kind of tackle. So how did you decide? Like, what was your deciding factor of what you focus on, and how did you intentionally put a plan together to kind of
Hmm.
move the needle? Doesn't matter what the needle is, right? To move the needle wherever you want it to go. You have to kind of go through that process. So what's your process that you kind of use this year?
Well, I think everybody should have a 5-year plan, even classroom teachers. Everybody in our organization should have a 5-year plan. And I joke about that because I do have a personal motto that everybody now quotes me on. I think they're being cheeky, but it's okay. I like it. That we have to go slow so that we can go fast. And it helps temper my
Yeah.
personality. It helps make sure that I'm honoring the current reality of the teachers that I support. And it also reminds me that I'm part of a bigger organism in my organization, right? And I need to make sure that the things I'm putting in place can sustain. Right,
Mm-hmm.
because like to me, whether you're a classroom teacher, you're a team leader, you're a department chair, wherever you are in your organization, whatever you're doing, you want to be able to design it and rule it out in a way that it can survive without you,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that's like the hallmark of leadership, whether that means that somebody else has the capacity to carry it on, or like the system or the structure is secure enough that it can flourish and just keep growing. And so when I'm trying to weigh chicken or the egg, curriculum or pedagogy, like where do we get started? I landed on curriculum because I feel like it is the foundation that we need to then make all of our pedagogical decisions. But that's tempting because we've got great colleagues that are out there
Yeah.
giving like great free,
Sharing stuff,
check out
doing,
stuff,
right.
that are
Yeah.
highlighting all these great strategies that easily align to the core practices. But when I'm thinking of myself as a classroom teacher or as a team leader or department chair, if we're not all on the same page, then we're kind of like a one person show and trying to build our capacity with pedagogy and delivering instruction. And so I don't know, maybe that's the wrong answer, but I feel
There
like
is
that's
no
what that,
wrong answers, right?
okay, exactly, right.
But I do see, I mean, if you don't know what you're teaching, you can have, some good strategies, but if there's no focus on the content and where it's going, I think you can spin your wheels, right? And so I find myself, looking at great teachers doing great things. You see them on social media, you see all of the stuff. But if you don't have a great context that you're applying those things to, I'm not saying it's not effective, but I think it's more effective when you have a set, you all know where you're going. You're going in the same direction, and then the little path you take and how you do that is kind of the next step.
Yeah,
Um,
100%, especially if you're in a position, like where we are, where our teams are like split, going and then opening up new campuses.
yeah.
You want them to be able to take bits and pieces with them so that whatever it is that you're, implementing is kind of like growing. And so for me, it was that aspect of a guaranteed and viable curriculum. How can we
Mhm.
come together? I'm not like a curriculum designer sitting in my
Mhm.
office, like writing it, right? I'm not the end user, the student. I'm not the one that's designing instruction in the classroom. I need teachers to be able to come in and do that work. And then I just kind of serve, as their facilitator. And so we set a goal that we were going to design in year one, thematically organized, proficiency based, and or performance focused units for levels 1 and 2 for all of our languages. And I
Wow,
think,
that's
I
a
know,
healthy
I
goal,
know,
isn't it?
and probably feels a little contrary to go slow to go fast, but I could have been like, everybody is going to get a curriculum by the end of the year. But I cannot shout out the teachers enough because they were bought in and we just kind of worked on like one unit at a time, right? We came together, what does it mean to be a novice? What are things novices can talk about? So then what does a course map feel like for level 1, right? And so within that, we're referring to our actual performance descriptors, we're referring to the proficiency guidelines, we're referring to our state standards who tell us that communication is the overarching goal. And then just having really honest conversations about, so then what does that mean? We please do not bring all of your resources. Like, let's just start from scratch. What does that mean? What can they talk about? What do they want to talk about? Now let's have that conversation about, lower intermediates, upper intermediates, to make sure that we're, vertically aligning appropriately. And we just came up with some things that I felt like were really engaging. Proud of some of the essential questions they wrote. There's a really cool unit going on in level 2 right now that's just fun to jump in on and have the kids argue, about like, are they influenced by cultural trends or are they individuals? And what does that mean for fashion and the music they listen to? And you're like,
That's
yeah, look at
awesome.
novice, high, intermediate level friends like having these debates, and it's beautiful. Um, but I think it's because we started with that foundation, right? What do our, performance descriptors tell us that our kids can talk about? How do we want to
Mhm.
organize that? What's the flow and the vibe to that type of course map, that vertically articulated curriculum? We love the Keys for Planning for Learning book. That's a really good
It's a great
resource.
foundational book.
Shout out.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
So even if you're doing this work, maybe it's just with your level 2 team at your high school or the collection of middle school teachers in a district. I think that resource, it does such a great job of bringing in. So like for us, we, adhere to the understanding by design model for curriculum design,
Mhm.
but it marries so beautifully with that resource. So having that foundational text, to refer to, because, that's ongoing PD. As we're working, we're learning.
Yeah.
all the time. Stop, read, take a break. Oh, let's go back. Let's check our work. But we got it done, and we celebrated that very loudly at the end of the
That's
year,
awesome.
to be able to know that we had that in place before high school 3 opens. But it has kind of honored the motto, right? To go slow, to go fast.
Yeah.
Now that you have a thematically organized curriculum in place, and it's not a Spanish curriculum, it's
Hmm.
not a French curriculum, it's not a Chinese curriculum, right? We have level 1 curriculum, level 2
Hmm.
curriculum, that all of our spoken languages can then come together as a campus level collaborative team, because our goals can be the same, our standards are the same. And now that we're ready to talk strategies, our strategies are the same too, right? When you talk about unpacking the core practices. So having that in place has also helped tear down silos. You don't just have, your one German teacher or your one Latin teacher or your one French teacher. That's the case in many of the districts in my area. You have a
Yeah.
level 1 team, right?
That's
And that
great.
and it's kind of been like an advocacy tool as well, because now, department chairs, they can advocate with their assistant principals. Hey, our collaborative team time, our common conference period, we're all ready to do this work together, right? Instead of, having Madame over here, with
Hmm.
her conference period kind of all by herself. So that's been really positive too, walking into collaborative team meetings. And we have a great instructional coach, and coming back and hearing that French is sharing this and Mandarin sharing that, Spanish is sharing this. It's been really cool to see. But I don't think we would have been able to leverage into that point if we didn't start with a guaranteed and viable curriculum first.
Yeah. I always think about, somebody told me once, I don't know who or even in what context, honestly, but we were talking about, Picasso didn't do cubism and all this, kind of abstract stuff until he knew the basics and he had the
Mm-hmm.
foundations down, right? Same with jazz music. You don't improv until you really have those foundations built, right? And then you can be spontaneous and creative, and everybody can have, the same strategies and the same goals, but different styles and different
Mm-hmm.
ways to get there. And that's how I always think about that sort of, you have to have that backwards design. You have to have those kind of objectives and learning goals and outcomes understood by everybody. It's only then that you can feel confident that Stephany might take a different way. I might take a different way to kind of get there, and that kind of goes to that pedagogy and the how we teach. As long as if we have those solid proficiency based instructional practices, at the core, I think that just makes the rest of it, a little bit easier. And just that now we can talk about, we're talking about the same thing. So now we can talk about, okay, this is the theme, this is the thematic unit, this is our goals. Stephany, what do you do? What is the most impactful strategy that you use with your students to meet these goals, right? And I know, like, I meet teachers all over the United States, and not everybody has a strong district coordinator or a district coordinator at all. And so, when you're planning your own, even if you're planning your own curriculum and you're in charge of your
Mm-hmm.
own your own self, right, which is both a blessing, I think, and a curse in many ways, right? Starting with that big picture backwards design and where we want students to be, and like you said, going slow and really understanding the proficiency levels and the performance
Mm-hmm.
descriptors and what those mean and how do they show them with performance assessments and doing all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then talking about the stuff, like the stuff we
Yeah.
do, right? And that's fun to talk about the stuff we do. And once you have that foundation, I think then we can really kind of get into those other sort of strategies.
No,
um,
I love that you say that, because we were just having a conversation recently about what does backwards planning mean,
yeah.
right? And we're all guilty of like, oh, I'm in the shower and I'm going to do this cool thing, right? I do think that for
Right.
the, like those days, thankfully, I think are behind us. But it's a very slippery slope to think that backwards planning is then planning from the assessment. And I've seen that, not necessarily here per se, but just in our profession as educators, right?
Yeah.
No, we unpacked the assessment and we know what's on the assessment, and that's where you kind of get like teach to the test, which
Mm-hmm.
isn't necessarily bad. So
Right.
if we don't lose sight of what the goals are, right? So that it's
Right.
really like a 3-part piece. Like, we have to make sure that our goals are tight, that they include a language function, right?
Yeah.
That they are
Yeah.
they're expecting the appropriate level of performance for our students. Our essential questions cool. Like, the kids are like, yeah, I
Yeah.
want to be able to answer that question. I'd like to talk about that with somebody, in the target language. And then making sure that our assessments really like honor and align to those. And, and coming from a background where there's not been an established curriculum, or there has been and it's been there a long time.
Mhm.
One of the things that I've even noticed is sometimes teachers might take those goals for granted. Yeah, somebody wrote them, they've been checked, they're awesome, so I just need to make sure what the performance assessment is. But there's like a beautiful nuance when you really put like your goals next to your assessments, to really be reminded that we're not just doing a spontaneous conversation. We're doing a spontaneous conversation so that our kids in the summer, once they've left our program, once things are
Right.
over, can like go back and forth and make some plans, and they're busy, and like agree on a time to hang out, right? And then, but that doesn't mean then you have to like script their curriculum out as far as like daily lessons go. So I
Right.
loved what you said earlier. We talk a lot in our department about like, we're masters of our craft and the art of the teacher. And the art of the teacher doesn't mean you get to like go rogue and do what you think is creative and like all the fun things we come up with in the shower, right?
Yeah.
But like knowing what our boundaries are. Like, I
Yeah.
joke that I'm a rule follower that likes to break rules. If I
I like
know,
that.
right? If I know what my black and my white boundaries are, then I can have so much fun in the gray. And I
Yeah.
feel like if I know what my goals are and I know what the assessments will be to give us evidence of those goals, I can do some cool stuff in my
Yeah.
classroom, right? And so
Yeah.
that's kind of where we are now, is now like working with our teachers who are already doing cool stuff, but like helping people at the individual level, what's your personal goal? But to make sure that all the beautiful things in the gray do reflect the core practices, they're high leverage
Yeah.
teaching practices, and just pushing our kids, right, to be able to hit those proficiency expectations. But I'm so proud of them. They're doing such great things. But we
That's
did the hard
awesome.
work last year, right? Putting that framework in place.
That's great. And I am going to put a link to the ACTFL. I think now they don't use core as much as they use guiding principles on their
Mm-hmm.
webpage. But again, so what a core practice is, for those, I think we've talked about it a couple times, but it's a high leverage teaching practice that
Mm-hmm.
is core to our profession, that all world language teachers should be able to do in order to be, effectively teach and for students to learn a language. And so when we talk about some of those core practices, you've mentioned a bunch without naming them directly, right? So backwards design is, something, performance assessments,
Mm-hmm.
and then we get some of that with the curriculum part, and then we're going to get some more core practices when you talk about instruction and pedagogy, right? So
Right.
so now this year, actually, I want another question I wanted to ask you, because I think this is
Yeah.
a a quandary that a lot of not only district people have, teacher leaders, other teachers. I I really heard you say that the teachers that did the work, right? They created this. They really looked at those performance indicators, and they looked at those proficiency guidelines and all that stuff, right? And they internalized it. They did it. They processed it, right? What happens now? How do you get that same level of deep understanding through doing when you do open your third high school, or when a new teacher comes next door and they come halfway through the year, or they come next year and the
Mm-hmm.
curriculum has been established, so to speak? And I say established because there's no
Mm-hmm.
curriculum that's set forever, right? But it's been set to some extent. How do you pass on? How do you accelerate that understanding for new people that come in? I know you may not have, I don't know if I have the answer. I don't know that anybody has the answer, but is there anything that you are trying to put in place, since you specifically know you're going to have more people coming on with this new high school, right?
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
I think it's a variety of things, right? So I think on like a more casual level, it's knowing that curriculum is a living document, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like this, we're going out, we're testing it in the field, and then we're coming back, and then we're saying like, how did that work? Was that can-do statement not clear? Did that learning progression not get us to the skill that we wanted? And so my practice is that I rotate who those people are. that are
That's
coming in with
great.
me. I like to bring in team leaders because they are facilitating, their collaborative team meetings, but then kind of rotate out who that teammate is that comes with them. We may meet once a 9 weeks. We may meet once a semester. It may be a full day. It may be a half day. It really just depends on like what that feedback is and what that needs to look like. I do like give copies of the book that we mentioned to the collaborators, and we'll say like, hey, let's go through Appendix J, great thing for language functions. Let's take a look at this section on essential questions. And so making sure that people have that opportunity to learn and kind of go through, granted on an abbreviated version, right? Because to your point, they weren't there like at the inception,
Right.
but having that level of understanding is just as important if you're taking part in like a reflection and revision or editing process. And then it's just really thinking about what is the onboarding plan for your new hires. And, where I am in the country, we are high mobility, right? A lot of Fortune 500 companies, people coming in, partners are getting transferred with jobs. So they may not all necessarily be from my state, or they may be somebody that was a part of an elementary bilingual program that's choosing to come up to high school. So not familiar with our state standards because they were at a different level, or they're new, either coming in from an alt-cert program or a pre-service program with a university. And so also designing that onboarding plan that honors all of those experiences. Because maybe you're new, or maybe you're just new to my state, or maybe you're just new to my district.
Yeah.
And all of that comes with some context and some history that we want to be respectful of. And so it's getting that time with the new staff and just making sure that it's not about here's how we think you need to teach world languages, but this is a philosophy of our district, right? We are proficiency based, we are performance focused. Who knows what that means? Let's make sure that we're all on the same page with that. And here's what we hold tight to. We hold tight to those goals in our units. We hold tight to the exemplar assessments, right? We just put out some great models that we feel like really reflect how you would create an interpersonal speaking, presentational writing assessment. And then ensure that they know I can't teach you all the things in like the 3 days of new hire week, right? But that you have an instructional coach, you have me as you start setting goals about what you think you need to be successful here, that you just for them to know they have support to achieve those goals. Right.
That's awesome.
And then just trying to offer a variety of ways for people to access learning. We have, it's not required, but if you want it, like right now, we're doing a book study of the Common Ground book, which is really great.
Yeah. Fantastic.
It's a monthly newsletter of read this, try this, or watch this, try this. We've got some language lounge episodes where like listen to this, try this. And just differentiating that professional development to make sure that there's just touches all along the year to meet their needs, including them, because even if you're new to us, new to the state, you have a voice and you have a way to contribute. So including them, rotating them through the curriculum collaborations, and then just planning and onboarding that honors everybody and that just brings them into what it is that we believe so that our
I
students
love
can
that.
achieve that goal of communication.
So everything you just said there really does reflect that go slow to go fast, right? Because
I hope
again,
so.
even that idea of sometimes we get like, we have to do a curriculum revision. We have 3 hours to be able to do it. I'm just going to pull the people that already know it well because it's going to be quicker and more efficient, right? And so that fast approach then leaves behind a lot of people, right? And that's not in the long run going to benefit your whole program and the stability of that. So I love that. So you've kind of got your curriculum now. So your first year
Yeah, I
down,
think so.
you've got that kind of settled, and it sounds like you have your plan of how you kind of keep making that live. So what's your next goals and your next steps then? And again, like when you talk about instruction or pedagogy and the stuff, how do you get to those goals, right? And how the students prove it in the assessment. That's a whole nother big kettle of fish. Is that
a whole nother?
a whole nother something, right? And so again, how do you make decisions and how do you decide what are the things that you start first, or maybe you don't decide? How does it get worked out of what you focus on and what the work is that you do, and how do you support teachers who then support students?
Well, back to a comment I made earlier about like not wanting to overwhelm anybody, right? I really like to have clarity like on the big picture. So, what are my collective district goals for curriculum and instruction? Or if I'm leading from the classroom, what are my campus goals of what like our administrators are wanting to see in the classroom? And so for me, I I felt like the best place to get started is what's the center of that Venn diagram? What do I know to be all good and true in world language instruction? And then what are the current goals, or what's the focus of this academic year or part of our strategic plan, right, of my organization? And the middle part of that is student discourse, inquiry, right? Talking about engagement. And what do I think the world language part, whether it's the core practice guiding principle, right? The high leverage, what's going to move the needle is target language instruction,
Mm-hmm.
right? So now, curriculum's still not done. Like level
Of
three's turn
course,
is
right.
this year. ASL is doing their work
There's
this
no
year.
check and then move on,
Right.
right? Yeah, we
But
keep.
the foundation is there where I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
now if we're all on the same page, we're collaborating together, we're starting to ask those good questions. It's the so what, now what, right? What? We need a
Yeah.
curriculum. Cool. So now what? We need to be able to start to bring it to life. And I think the best way to do that, but then honor, what our organizations ask of us, it was
Mhm.
target language instruction. And so, the 90%, that's like kind
Bum,
of
bum,
kind of
bum.
stress you out a little bit. You know what I mean? I hope people can only listen to us, because if there's any viewers, my hands are all over the place.
There are
Um,
viewers, and it's fascinating. It's fun to watch, though. I recommend you all watch the YouTube version of this one, because you just are not going to get Stephanie's personality if you don't. I love it.
oh goodness, it's so and I made a mistake. I came in, I'm like, yeah, this is like the easiest way to start, and maybe we can do both. And then I'm like 90%, and then it's like, what?
Whoa.
Because in an absence a of learning, you're doing your best, right? And that 90% can be, I don't want to say misconstrued, but maybe that is the
Mhm.
right word, where or misinterpreted. Maybe that's
Mhm.
that, right? If you don't have somebody like really helping you like unpack that. And what does that mean? Because does it mean that I, the teacher, every word out of my mouth, 90% of my words have to be in the target language? And
Mhm.
then if that's just like this surface level understanding, then who is, taking the load off and saying, no, like in there's all these strategies to help like your spoken language, right? But then it's like, it's not just you. It's
Mhm.
90% of the language, right? So, like, what do the texts look like that you're putting in front of your kids? What about the activities that you're designing? Let's take a look at the resources. Think of all the things that are input. So, one, it's like, well, first, do we all have the same understanding of what input means, right?
Mhm.
And the Common Ground book is doing a really good job of that
Mhm.
in that section that breaks down input, which is lovely. And so we've had some professional learning just recently. An excellent facilitator came in and just kind of talked us through how to increase, student discourse, that it's not just the teacher that's responsible for the target language, but the students are responsible, your resources are responsible. And you just kind of saw like all the shoulders go like this,
Yeah.
right? So you might have been saying, oh, I'm only like at, 40%, but maybe you were at 60 because you weren't giving yourself credit for a well-designed lesson plan and an engaging lesson that got kids
Yeah.
talking. So just really starting to unpack the role of input. What does target language instruction really mean?
Mhm.
um, so that we can start affirming some excellent practices that are already going on in our classrooms, and then setting goals of something, that one little thing we can move the needle on, and
Yeah.
let's add that to the bag of tricks, right? Because it's the art of teaching.
Yeah.
So there's just maybe one more tool we need to add, one more trick we need to add, so that over time that goal seems a little bit more attainable.
Mhm.
But also, like, none of us as educators own Maseratis. None of us can go 0 to 90 like in a hot
Right.
minute, right? And so just knowing that it does take time, right? And so that's where we're at right now. Seeing some really great things going on in the classroom. There's a really great resource, the 7 steps to a language rich, interactive, foreign language classroom, language, I scratch it up, put world language on it.
Oh,
But that,
nice.
yeah, so it's from Silets, and it's a great workshop with a great resource that's chock full of understanding what proficiency and performance means and how we acquire language, but just some really concrete strategies to increase student discourse. So I feel like people laugh about how many books I buy. And if there's anyone listening that was in my
Yeah,
last department,
I
they're like, I
know. I
know,
just,
it's so bad. Like, look, it's just so bad.
yeah.
But I love it. And I love anytime that I can bring some learning in, but then tell teachers, hey, today might have felt like fire hose to the face and like you couldn't keep up. But don't worry, because here's a resource that you can
Mhm.
refer back to in your collaborative team meeting, right? Here's something that then maybe now that we've had some initial learning, that can be our spring semester book study to then do deeper dives and things like that, because we just have great people in our profession doing really great work. And then also, I'm not the one making all this stuff up. I'm not that smart. And so
Yeah.
just bringing in, those colleagues and those resources, I just think it's really, really helpful, because we know that one-off PD is not the most
Mhm.
successful, but yet we also have access to our PD days in our districts, and it is what it is. So anytime that I can find somebody that I know is going to facilitate great learning, but a resource comes along with it to help us continue that learning, that's always worth
Yeah,
it for me.
that's awesome. I love it. So, so you said you have a 5-year plan.
I do have a 5-year plan.
So, yeah, let's talk about this. So, I think that overall, I think target language use, and again, the most that you possibly can, and
Hmm.
shooting for that, maybe attainable, maybe unattainable, right? 90% or whatever our goal. Research just shows that that is the most important core practice, that all the rest of them, what kind of line up under that, in my opinion. And
I do
so,
not disagree. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
So where do you, so, and again, that there's so many nuances in that you could stay there
Hmm.
forever, because if you're
Yeah.
looking at authentic resources, they're in the target language and making them
Hmm.
comprehensible, and tasks and all of those other things. Do you have a next step? I'm just curious if you have you're digging into target language deep, or maybe that may be a long process depending on where things are at. Or do you have a next step that you're working on with your 5-year plan?
Yeah, I kind of I appreciate like a soft launch that gives like a big picture of like, okay, now I kind of have some general understanding, and then we can start to see the pathways. And I feel like that's kind of what we've done in our most
Mm-hmm.
recent professional development in October, is just talking about target language is all the things, and let's focus on student discourse, right? So as now we will kind of start rolling that out, really trying to make connections between that learning, the book study that we have going on, and then just kind of letting the teachers tell us what they're ready for next. So I joke that I have a 5-year plan, but I also said, like, I'm not the one up here writing all the curriculum. Well,
Right.
now that we're starting to get into our groove as this new department, then that's kind of me releasing the reins a little bit, taking input from the teachers, taking input from our instructional coach about what she's hearing, the conversations she's hearing in the collaborative team meetings, what the teachers are needing, questions that they're posing, and then kind of do something formal once we get back from break and say, okay, we have this learning under our belt. What are we ready for next? And still giving some choices that I feel like might
Mm-hmm.
make, the most sense. I really love doing a lot of learning around, a world language learning cycle. And whether that's in a 90-minute block or a 45-minute block, how are we launching our classes that get their target language brain turned on? How are we shifting into input? And then, wrapping up that class. And maybe you're doing that cycle twice because you're like in a block schedule. And 90 minutes
Mm-hmm.
is a long time with our friends.
Yes, it
And so
is.
we want to make sure that like transitions are good and we're keeping them, the momentum is good to keep them engaged. I think that there's a lot of room to talk about target language instruction when you're talking about what is a world language lesson cycle.
Yeah.
And so I've done some of that work with other coordinators. Our state has a great district coordinator group that came up with a really great model several years ago before we all didn't get to see each other for like a year.
Right.
That kind of, brings in, threads from gradual release of responsibility, work about primacy, recency, and just what we know to be good teaching and good lesson design. And so we've been doing some soft launches about what a world language lesson cycle would be in our monthly newsletter. And then that might be something a little bit more formal than
Would you
we offer
expand
up.
on a little
Yeah,
bit?
to see who wants to do some deep dives, because I just feel like at this stage, like we're kind of getting over the novice high hump, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and moving into the intermediate phase of our own work. And so it's just time to differentiate that learning. So just getting some things out and then seeing who wants to take that deeper, because we are very grateful to be in a district that believes in the PLC process and the beauty of collaborative teaming with colleagues. And so if I'm giving you what you need and I'm giving this person what they need and this person what they need, then the beauty of job embedded PD learning from and with each other, then we're just going to build collective capacity that way. And it doesn't have to continue being big box PD on the same topic for everybody all the time, but we can still stay within that lens of target language instruction and all the different things
Love
that we can
it.
do to get there.
Love it. Love it. Love it. It's funny because I was just at another district with somebody we know, Christy
Hi,
Gilliland,
Christy.
and yes, and they are doubling down in their district about with the PLC format, and they have been for quite a while. And so their assessments, their entry point is assessments, right? They have their curriculum. They've been working on that for a long time. That's fairly established. And so their primary, most important thing, because they're just starting, the work with PLCs, is to talk about assessments and understand the proficiency levels and
Mm-hmm.
grading and reliability between grading and, what is it?
Inter-rater reliability.
Reliability. Thank you. I'm like, yes, that's it. That's a mouthful, right? So, not everybody's entry point is going to be the same
Right.
thing, but I think it's that thoughtful deliberation of where are we? Where are my teachers? What do they need? And again, you don't have to be a district coordinator or a district person to have these conversations, because it could be the three teachers that teach French right next to me. Where are we? What do our students need? How can
Mm-hmm.
we make this experience the best for our students, and really gain our own, up our own skills and
Yeah.
understandings as well.
Well,
Yeah.
so I love that you even talked about, that lovely district and that lovely part of the country with that lovely person doing
Yes.
assessment, because, so often people are like, oh, PLC, then we do data analysis and data protocol.
Right.
And then you could have a world language teacher be like, I don't have any data.
Right.
Right? I'm doing
Right.
performance assessment. I don't have discrete items that I can give you, like how many right or wrong. And then I'm like, oh, but we do. We have beautiful data with our rubrics, right? So, like a
Yes.
performance based rubric, you can have so many great data conversations that come from there that not only just, do which iterator reliability with performance
Right.
based rubrics sometimes is difficult. So, you're calibrating, you're norming, you're doing all
Yep.
those things. But just it's so cool when you're in that room and then, somebody's saying, my kids did great on language control and vocabulary, but
Mm-hmm.
communication strategies, man, wah, wah, right? Like if I narrowed that down, my class average is a 2. And
Yeah.
the Chinese teacher can look at the German teacher and say, how did your kids do on communication strategies on that part of the rubric? And the German teacher's like, we got average 3.8. We're so good in the German. And then it's like, yeah, okay, then teach me.
What
Like,
did you do?
show
Right.
me what you're doing, because it doesn't matter if it's
Absolutely.
Spanish or French or German or Chinese. How are you helping your kids be effective communicators in a conversation? Teach me your ways.
Yeah.
So I love that. That's so exciting. Rubrics will definitely, that's our goal for next year. We've got just some that we're playing with, and then once we can like nitpick them enough to debate them and talk through the nuance, we're excited to do a rubrics 2.0 for next year, because those
I love it.
conversations are so doable, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And it's so funny how both you and Christy have your goals for your district. They're very different, and yet you both started at the same place, understanding the proficiency guidelines, the performance indicators, our big picture of where we want our students to go and how to get them there, and all the indicators and all of that. And so it's just that idea of backwards planning, whether it's from a lesson level, a unit level, a district level, a program level, whatever it is. I think, whenever you can really understand that process of that backwards design. My husband jokes that I backwards design my life. Like if I could, I absolutely would.
100%.
Totally back. Like every part of my life can be backwards designed. I think if I, stop and think about it. But this has been a great conversation. The last thing I want to just ask you is there anything else, any other things that you feel really apply to that go slow to go fast? Like, what is some tips and advice that you have for teachers as far as, I don't know, just as far as your motto of go slow, go fast?
Oh my goodness. I think go slow to go fast. I just want to like tattoo it on my forehead. Because it really does work with everything, right? If you're the teacher that you're mentoring the new hire, right? And you want them to be so successful. And so you want to give them all the things. Remind yourself, we go slow to go fast. What's the most important thing for that person tomorrow, or to get started off on the right foot and to slowly move them forward, because they're trying their best to learn a new district or to learn a new state or to learn a new profession. And, we're teachers. We want to do right by our kids, right? We want to do all the things the best way that we can do them for our students. So please go slow to go fast as we're welcoming new people, because in our teacher shortage, we can't afford to lose them, right?
Absolutely.
And then I think that because we always want to do what's best for our kids, sometimes we have to go slow to go fast for ourselves. Just coming off our state conference, and you know how it is, right? You leave ACTFL, you leave your state conference, and you're like, I'm going to do all of these things. I went to so many great sessions. I learned all this stuff. No, even in our own learning, we have to protect our space and protect our heart, protect ourselves, and go slow to go fast. What's the one thing I can try right now that's going to move the needle? And then once that becomes second nature, then I'll try the next new thing. We are surrounded by excellent teachers. Social media gives us access to our friends and our colleagues who are so smart and so willing to help us, right? I feel like in world languages, we will sacrifice ourselves for each other because it's just such a beautiful community. But you can't call all the friends. You only can reach out to one. Try one new thing at a time. I just think that's relevant right now in conference season, to go slow to go fast
100%.
for yourself. And then also with advocacy, I joke we are the fifth core in my state because we're required for 2 years. I'm like, that's half the time. That counts for the fifth core to me. And there are so many things that if I were leading from the classroom, that I'd want to talk to my principal about, or that, in my position, I'd want to talk to my executive director about. But what's like the one thing that'll move the needle? And then be a whipping, about that one thing, because we know that we all need a lot, right? We're thinking of staffing, we're thinking of resources, we're thinking of the most valuable resource of time, right? We need more time. Class sizes are huge in some of our districts. And so what is the one thing that you can go slow on, right? You're doing those check-ins, you bring in an article, you send in an email, look, it's working here. And then layer on the next thing, because I just think we're all so passionate about what we do. It's not about pumping the brakes and slow play things, but we go slow to go deep so that we can then kick it into high gear, once that switch gets flipped and whatever it is, the thing that's taking our attention. And then it's on to the next, right? We don't stop. We go on to the next thing.
There's no rest. There's no end in sight, right? Because then it just all starts coming around again. But that's what makes it interesting and challenging, and and a vibrant. I wouldn't want a job that was stagnant and always stayed the same, right?
Right? How boring.
A
for those
little
friends.
Stability would be nice, but no more COVID or like today hurricanes or things like that. But in general, a little bit of stability is good. But thank you so much, Stephany. This has been a really fun conversation, and I just appreciate it. We're going to get some of the resources that you mentioned in the show notes and pass on that learning. One of your mentors that you talked about with Gradual Release did a language lounge with me quite a while back, and we probably need to resurface that about gradual release of responsibility with Greta Lundgaard. And so that would be, we might relink that as well. And then I'm going to publicly say it. We're going to get your instructional coach on here, Shelly.
Shelly Brown.
I'm telling you, we're calling her out because, she said she would. I know she's very, very busy. But it's funny because for the Language Lounge, when somebody agrees to be a guest, I have like a little form that they fill out, and I ask them like, who's somebody amazing that, you would love to hear from. And I don't know how many times Shelley Brown got mentioned, but I mean like 5 or 6 or I'm like, okay, all right, people. Yes, I promise we're going to get her as soon as we can. So I can't wait to have that conversation about instructional coaching. I hope she'll have that.
Oh, yes,
With
she's
me.
amazing. And I know her director, so I'll put in a good word.
There you go. Just twist her arm a little bit. But thank you so much for sharing kind of your experiences and some just ideas, for teachers. Again, whatever level, in my opinion, all teachers are leaders. It doesn't matter,
100%.
like positionality doesn't matter. Like you are there as a leader in your field, and whether you're leading yourself and your students, or helping your school or department or district or whatever, I think everybody can kind of take some ideas away from what you shared. So I really do appreciate you sharing.
Thanks for inviting me, Michelle. It's always great to sit and visit with you. I could talk to you all day.
Oh, we'll have to get together soon. So thank you so much, and have a great afternoon. Thanks.
Thanks.